Okay, so last time we were able to put together the nested if statements in their abbreviated format in terms of syntax, and we were able to control the flow of the program being a menu-driven one. So that means any selection you choose, we should have the appropriate direction in which the application will be used. So what can we do? Well, we could work one feature at a time. Okay, that would be the best way to attack this. Start with something that will add a name and print all names. Okay, so add names at least, and then we'll move on to print all names so we can verify that indeed the list that we're developing or putting forward to hold data for us will have those names. So where would I declare the list, or where the variable that will be of type list where I'm going to be storing names? I could declare it global, but it's preferable to make it local to main. Now I'm going to introduce you to something new. And in particular, how do you create an empty list using the list constructor? And the reason is a list is really a class, and when you want to use it, you're instantiating an object. And that is when you're invoking the constructor for that, you are creating the object. So let's call it names. That would be the object, but it doesn't exist until you say what type is it going to be. Okay? And you could do something like this. Oops, list. There. What we're doing now is we're actually creating the list, but it's empty. As a matter of fact, if we want to see if indeed it exists, let's go ahead and print it here, and I'll take it out. Print, and that would be names. So that's the object. Let's run this for a second. And you can see here we have brackets, which is really an empty list right there. Okay, so we're going to pick 5 now. We don't need to print this. We're good. We have the list that we need. So the key now is, how do we populate it? How do we put data in it? So we're going to create a function, and I'm going to set it up above menu. And I'm going to write def, and we're going to give it a name. Add a name is the job. Maybe insert name. And that will be the name of this function. However, it will have to take an argument. Okay? Let's call it the list. And or you could call it names if you want. The same, if that's what you intend to do. It does not have to be a different name, since we know we're passing this by reference. So it could be names. That's not a problem. We could reuse that variable, name, right? And we know we've passed it by reference. So at this stage, we're going to ask the user to go ahead and enter a name, and then we're going to append it to the list, right? So it's going to be that simple. So first thing I'm going to do is name equals input, enter a name. That's it. Okay? So now name is a variable, a local variable in the function insert name. So what we're going to do now is we're going to use names dot append. Now notice if I do dot append here, it's not giving me dot append, and that's the reason is it doesn't know at this stage that names is really a list. Let's go back and make it understand that's what you're doing. So let's go to the option if you picked one. That is what you want. So instead of saying print adding a record under construction, go ahead and call the function insert name. And guess who are we going to give it? Names. Now if we go back here, So again, the function call is called insert name, and then you're going to give it an argument, names, which is this empty list. In other words, now this names here is the empty list, right, that we started with. We're going to ask for the user to enter name. This is singular. And now we're going to do names. Now watch when I do dot. Aha. I get the methods associated with a list. The reason is the editor is smart enough to realize that is what we're doing here. And we're going to do a dot append. And guess what? You're going to append the name to it. So that's going to add names to the list. Now, one way to verify that indeed that's what's going on, let's go ahead and create the one that will print the names for us. All right, and then we're going to call it as well. So number 4, option number 4. So this is option number 1. We're going to do option number 4 so we can verify quickly if indeed this thing is working the way we designed it. So let's go ahead and do def and print names. And it will take names as well. And the way we can do this, we could do a for loop and then print each name in a single line. We could do something like this: for name in names. So we're going to do it the easiest way possible. And then we're going to print name. And then we're going to do name. Okay? All right, so we're reviewing now how do we step through a list using a for loop. Notice I'm not doing range, I'm not doing an index. This is the simplest form of doing that. So now let's go ahead and test. Let's test this program. Let's run it. Let's go ahead and try to print names for now. So it should be nothing in there. Okay. Oh, by the way, I did not call or did not modify number 4. So let me exit here. So it's always good to test your program. Notice I forgot to call that function. We're going to call it print names. And we're going to give it names, which is our local list here. And I'm going to run it this time. And again, knowing full well that it's empty. So we're going to go ahead and do a for print. So notice we're going to get nothing. Nothing happens. So let's go ahead and do now and insert a name. So 1. Jack. So how do we know it's in there? Well, let's go ahead and do a for. And Jack prints. So we're good. So let's go ahead and add more names. Let's choose 1. And let's add Kelly. Okay, let's do 4 now. And see if we get Jack and Kelly. Sure enough. Name, Jack, name, Kelly. So it's working. Let's go ahead and add another name. And obviously you're going to have to pick the right option, which is 1 to add a name. And let's put George, right? And let's go ahead to 4 and see if indeed we get all 3 names. And sure enough, Jack, Kelly, George are all there. So as far as we're concerned, this is working just fine. Remove name, find a name. We haven't worked these out yet. So I'm going to pause here because we're going to do these in the next video. So before I do that, let me just make sure that we understood or review some of the key points here of what we've done. 1, we created a list using a constructor that builds an empty list. So names is my own local list, right? That will be populated by calling the insert name and supply it with names. You supply it with names and it will handle it. So if we go over here, what would it do with it? Well, it's going to ask you for a name and it will append that name to names. And then what else happens? Well, we've designed option 4, print names. And we supply it with our local list now that has names in it, right? Which is no longer empty after you've inserted a few names. But the printing part is fairly straightforward. We've done this with a for loop. And we step through the list one item at a time and printing it. And notice we don't need to index here. If you do want to index, then use the range feature and the length function for names. Okay, so having done all that, so what are the two other options we haven't completed? That's option 2 and option 3, and we will do that in our next video. I'll see you then.